Land Conservancy, and I have a short presentation that will go through a little bit about land conservation and easements. The Summit Land Conservancy is based in Park City. Since 2002, we've been protecting open space mostly in Summit County, but we've recently decided that if people need help in Morgan or Wasatch or anywhere where we have the Wasatch back, we would be willing to reach out and try to help farmers and ranchers or communities save their open spaces. The Summit Land Conservancy and Utah Open Lands, Wendy Fisher will speak after me, are similar organizations. We're called land trusts, and we really exist to serve our communities by helping protect open space in a variety of different ways. So first I have a little video, I think.
I think saving land is one of the most important things that we can do.
There isn't a field I can't walk through and not remember when my grandfather and I fixed that gate, or my dad and I put in that fence.
Why not save land? I've always had the thought and learned the lesson that you should leave what you borrow or what you're on better than what you found it. That was ingrained for my grandpa and my father, and the land that I get to be a part of, I definitely want to leave it better than I found it, and I work hard every single day to make sure I can live that legacy.
Being out here and watching the clouds roll in, it's just perfect. Watching the nature and feeling it and experiencing it firsthand. When the pressures of other things just are building up and exploding, there's nothing like getting out on the land and doing anything on it. As a kid, I would have done anything to avoid fixing barbed wire fence. I actually kind of enjoy it now.
Land is my happy place. If I'm ever stressed at work or at home or just really need a break, kind of feeling in a funk, I just go for a walk or a hike or a bike ride and look at this place. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful.
We feel so strongly about open space that we decided years ago that we were going to commit 1% of every commission the realtors in town have been for 25 plus years. Every commission that we make, we donate 1% of that commission to Summit Land Conservancy. Land is my religion. It's my everything.
Land is our way of life. Land is our family. Land is our cattle to our horses, to the hands in our dirt. Land is our hope. We really wanted to stay in ranching. We want to be able to run cattle on it forever. We want it protected because we want our kids to be able to experience what we did. Summit Land Conservancy is one of many large rocks sitting at the bottom and the base of a river. And if you think about the bottom and the base of a river and all those big rocks, you've got Summit Land Conservancy, you've got the other rocks being the farmers and ranchers that are willing to give money and support or give their land up. You've got other supporters that are willing to give. And if one of those rocks were to give, the whole river and the side of the bank would wash away. It takes every single rock in the bottom of that river to make sure that it stays there and it stands there. Summit Land Conservancy is the rock that's going to keep everyone else pulled together.
Well, we hope so anyway. Thank you. I want to start just briefly to talk about what a land trust is. We are non-profit organizations, so even though Summit is in our name, we are not affiliated with Summit County. When we do a conservation transaction, we don't have a pot of money that we go to. We always have to go out and find the funding that's going to help this family or this open space stay as open space. So just like the Nature Conservancy, Utah Open Lands, we all basically are out there trying to find projects that have a lot of conservation values and that we can fund. We are involved with conservation easements, which I think is what's going to talk about. We're going to talk about a little bit more here tonight. A conservation easement is basically a permanent agreement between the landowner and the land trust that is recorded on title of the property, and it affects how that property can be used forever. Conservation easements are up to, it's an agreement that you have to come to. So nobody comes to a landowner and says, you have to do this, or you must do this, or you can't do that. It's always a two-way process. So we'll go to a landowner and we'll say, hey, you know what, if you want to sell your fishing access, maybe we can get you a little more money. The landowner can always say, no, I don't want to do that. So you might have to take a little bit less money, but that's kind of the way these deals work. The landowners ultimately decide what we're going to protect on the property. The conservation easement cannot be removed by subsequent landowners, but the property can be willed to your heirs or sold to somebody else. They all, in the future, just have to abide by the same terms of the conservation easement. Easements can, in very rare occasions, be modified, but only if it makes the conservation values better. So if we're protecting, say, an agricultural use on the property, and something is going to enhance that agricultural use, you know, the best thing is maybe we make the easement a little bit bigger, those kinds of things, then we can modify the easement. Also, I should say, if you guys have questions, you can just shout them out at me. It doesn't have to be a lecture. It isn't easy to protect open spaces. A lot of stars have to align. Everybody knows how to put up a for sale sign. Conservation takes a little bit more time. The first thing you have to have is a willing landowner. Again, as I said before, nobody forces anybody to put a conservation easement on your property. It has to be the landowner and the family has to say, you know what, we just don't want to see houses on it. We want to do something different. The second piece we have to have is funding partners. So sometimes I get a call from a landowner and I go out and I look at a piece of property and I don't have funding that I can bring to the table for whatever reason. And sometimes we can find conservation buyers, which is where somebody comes in from the outside and buys a piece of property and then they donate an easement on it. So first we have to have a willing landowner. The second is conservation values. The IRS has decided that there are certain things, certain values on property that they're willing to give a tax deduction for. And if they give you a tax deduction, it means that you're not paying money to the federal government, so the federal government doesn't have money to do whatever it is they do with our money. So there has to be some good public value in exchange, right? Because now the federal government doesn't have the money to fix potholes or whatever they do. So what will they protect? So agriculture is one of the things, wildlife habitat is one of the things, wetland and riparian areas, view shed. Now, sometimes you have a piece of property that is absolutely gorgeous, incredibly beautiful, but you can't see it from a public road. So the view shed value doesn't apply to that particular conservation easement. Public recreational access is another one of the values that the IRS will offer in exchange. It doesn't have to be. And also then historic sites. An easement doesn't have to have all of these. But usually, in order for our organization to do a transaction, there has to be more than one, at least more than one conservation value that we're going to protect. And part of the reason is we want to protect the best properties that we can, and we have limited capacity. We can only do so many deals. So we want to do the deals that have, you know, the property is most endangered, the property is most at risk of maybe being developed, but it also has a lot of great things going on that property. Maybe there's a nice, you know, swamp, and there's really good agriculture that's been on that property for a long time. So we try to find a lot of things that will all go together. The next one. Is there funding for the project? So one of the things that kind of breaks my heart is if you're familiar with the Camas Valley. It's very beautiful. There are lots of farms and ranches out there. And I would love to be able to work with those landowners to help save that. And I'm really finding a hard time because I can't find enough money to bring to the table. Those are the kinds of things that break my heart, because in some of those cases, the only value they really have is the agricultural use. One of the other things, I think, well, local support. So the fact that you guys have a Midway bond and now a Wasatch County bond is actually huge. In Summit County, the Park City area has passed numerous bonds over the years, but Summit County also has a little funding source that we've used. They won't give more than 10% of an easement's purchase value, but it's really powerful money because it says, wow, this community wants to see this saved. So we can take that information out to other funding sources and say, look, Summit County wants to see it saved. These other people want to see it saved, so we help you'll do it. One of the other things that I want to point out here is ownership of property. We know that lots of times families have these holdings, and there's lots of cousins and uncles and aunts and things like that. We had a situation with a family, and it was, I think, 4 siblings, but it was all divided differently depending on if it was a daughter or a son. And there was one, Uncle No. They called him Uncle No. Because everything you asked Uncle No, he'd say, no. Is the sky blue? No. Do you want to sell an easement? No. So, that deal ultimately fell apart because they couldn't get Uncle No to the table. So a willing landowner really is the first piece. All right, what we do when we purchase a conservation easement is called a bargain sale, and we buy what we are buying when we buy a conservation easement. We're buying the development rights off the property. So there's a little bit of a paradox here. When we talk about the conservation values on the property, like the wetlands or the agricultural use or the view shed, you can't put a monetary dollar on that. So what they put the monetary value on is the value of the development rights. So in my little example here, you start with what's the fee value of the property. If you were going to put a for sale sign up on your property, and I use large round numbers because I'm from Park City. I don't know any better. So if you were going to buy fee title, that's the ground and everything, maybe it's worth $10 million. So the easement then is only the development rights. So it's not worth the full $10 million, right? At the end of the transaction, the landowner is still going to hold the ground. So the easement value can be worth anywhere between 50, 60, 70, 80% of the total value. So in my example here, I figured the easement itself would be worth $6.5 million. So that is where we start, at $6.5 million. All of this is determined by an appraisal. It's a pretty complicated appraisal. They go out and they look at the property before there's a conservation easement on it, and then they say, well, now if there were no development rights here, it would be valued at the after value. So, and that's where we get to the next step, is we go to the landowner and say, all right, your easement's worth $6.5 million, but will you sell it to us for 4.8? And there's a couple of reasons for this. One of them is that our funding sources always want to see that the landowners are participating. I don't really think that's entirely fair, but that's the way this game is. They want to see that the landowners are participating. So in this situation, the landowner is going to get, at the end of the day, $4.875 million, if we can raise the money. They're going to donate the difference, which is 1.6. That can become a tax write-off. In many cases, landowners have a very low basis in the land, so when they sell this conservation easement, the tax write-off can be helpful. And there are enhanced tax incentives for this. You can roll that tax write-off over for up to 15 years. It's not as easy as putting up a for sale sign. Wendy's here, I'm here, Kate Saddlemeyer in the back, if you'll wave. She's our Summit Land Conservancy's Conservation Director. We're all here to talk to you and answer questions that you have about this transaction and process and how it goes. But there are a lot of steps as we move through this process. Wendy and I were talking to somebody a minute ago, by the time there's a public fundraising campaign, both of us have fundraising campaigns right now for projects we're doing in Park City. I hope you've heard of them. We've been working really hard to make sure everybody hears of them. But by the time we get to that point, you know, we've already done a lot of grant writing. We've already hopefully brought some other funding sources to the table. Everybody does due diligence. Everybody has an opportunity to say, whoa, wait, this isn't, I don't want to do this anymore. But once we start really going forward with it, you know, it gets moving along. It usually takes at least 2 years to close a conservation easement transaction. At least that's what it takes us. And a lot of times, a lot more. Once the easement is purchased and placed, it's recorded at the county courthouse, stays on the property forever. But that's just really the beginning. Because now you've basically entered into a very long-term relationship with a land trust. Because that land trust has a perpetual responsibility to make sure that what you wanted done in that conservation easement is done year after year after year. So we put a little bit of money aside for stewardship, and we have stewardship staff that every year will call the landowner up and say, hey, how's it going? Let's go out and walk the property. Anything interesting happening? We really take the idea that we're partners now with the landowner in this. Maybe we can find funding for a river restoration. We've got one landowner up in Hennifer who's doing that right now. You know, we want to help maintain the goals that those landowners have for that property. When the property changes hands, now 2 or 3 generations down the road, the Summit Land Conservancy and Utah Open Lands still have to be around, making sure that those subsequent landowners are honoring the terms of the conservation easement. And it's a beautiful thing. All right. It's you.
It's me.
It's you.
I'm moving on up.